Well, first of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for inviting me to the Transbordering Laboratory. Sorry. And it's a pleasure for me to talk about the border. I know best that of Portugal with Spain, especially, but not only, with Galicia, the northern Spain, Spanish region. I'll do my best not to ramble this subject, something I tend to because as an analytical person, I usually talk like a parrot. So I try to be clear. To begin with, I will briefly explain the process of the border formation, general characteristics, and later on, I will focus on the Minho Valley and the Eurocity ValencaTui. I will like to share with you a declaration of principles. This song, attention please. This song is terra, land. Terra is a song of a Galician group, Tanxugueira, a folk band, quite famous for being among this year's celebration a candidate to represent Spain to the Eurovision Song Contest. Most of the song is written in Galician language, and defends a modernized tradition by using traditional musical instruments such as the tambourine. The chorus of the song is really meaningful. Non hay frontera, there is no border. Which is repeated along the song in 5 languages: Galician, Basque, Catalan, Asturian, and Spanish. Now I want to offer you the opportunity of hear the song. going to, okay. Okay. I'm now going to explain, but the formation, taking a brief look into history, the formation of Portuguese and Spanish border. There is a general map. Okay. There is a general map on the left. The north of the country in the middle, and on the right, the south of Portugal. The first two dates, 1064 and 1127, is before independent Portugal, where is the Condado Portucalense. Portugal, like a country, into within the Kingdom of Leon. If you see it, borders between 11th to 13th century changed a lot. But in fact, a historian called this period as Portugal in definition of border. This period finished in 1297 with Treaty of Alcañices. With this treaty, it's considered that the oldest border in Europe is formed. Well, as a historian, a bit picky, I don't agree too much because border really changed until the 19th century with Treaty of Lisbon of 1864. But in the case of ValencaTui, is the north of the northernmost region of the country. There is a reason because first of all this region it wasn't Portugal. It's because Tui was the capital of a diocese, ecclesiastical diocese, in both sides of Minho River. So it's a brief look into borders of this. Of course, there are some questions of the borders. For example, question of Olivenza in the south of the country, not resolved from a Congress of Vienna of 1815. The question of borders between Portugal and Spain. The stabilization of the border allows Portugal to focus on the maritime and Atlantic vocation. And which is my turn is back on its border territory now at Raya. The Raya has this general character. A sparsely populated border, except Minho Valley and Algarve's coast. The Raya is the name in Portuguese and in Spanish, the stripe, where is that the border is referred to. The most intensive and close relation are only at the Portuguese and Galician border. In fact, in some moments of history, we talk about a car country. Car because Portugal and Spain are the first and the second producer of cars. So, in the fascist dictatorship of Salazar and Franco, mutatis mutandi Iron Curtain of the Cold War, we have the car country with a lot of smuggling, irregular migration, etc. The high development of smuggling was general in all the Spanish-Portuguese border. Spanish people buy coffee. Portuguese coffee is very famous, and Portuguese people, for example, textile, pullover, and other provisions. Border, Spanish-Portuguese border, is an area of strong migration. For other developed regions within each country, and other European countries. For example, in the 60s, Portuguese people migrated, 1 million Portuguese people to France. You can imagine for a country of 8 million of inhabitants because poverty and colonial war in Africa with our last colonies of Angola, Mozambique, Cabo Verde, Guinea, and São Tomé. War. And the characteristic is there are the outermost territories of the periphery, the less developed region. In fact, I can see there is really change in this last 30 years after accession of Portugal and Spain to EEC, after the European Union. Before, practically like the ancient regime, practically communitary practice that remains still today. Now, I want to explain some problems on cross-border collaboration. In fact, we can speak about twin cities. Historically, there are only real twin cities, twin village, Rio de Honor, a very little village divided by the border at the Middle Ages, and two recent by historical development that El Marco, the same names, El Marco, Spanish side, due to the growth of population of the Spanish Extremaduran side, but by Portuguese population. And Vilar Formoso, Fuentes de Oñoro, two little towns that grow because of the border and commerce. Other problem is implementing mechanisms of collaboration because of the size of municipalities. In Portugal, municipalities are has a richer extent, and in Spain are very, very little. And of course, the quarantine I speak about. Well, for example, to illustrate, this is Rio de Honor. In the local language of Astur Leonese language, Rui de Honor. This is they are the official names. People call Rui de Honor. The Cima, the Spanish side, the Baixo, Portuguese side, and you can see the border here. In this boundary mark between 1976 to 1990, there were a chain cutting off the border. And you, in this peak, you can see the border. Well, and I can see show you surreal moments of the COVID period, Corona, because of the border. Only border 2 weeks, twice a week, 2 hours only. The Portuguese side with the typical Portuguese payment, and the Spanish side, look at the border. As I say, simply surreal in this century. Other twin towns, the 2 peaks, Vilar Formoso, Fuentes de Oñoro, about between the 2, about 4,000 inhabitants, and Marco el Marco. The smallest bridge of the world, border bridge, before and now after, typical Mediterranean, as you can see at the peaks. Now I'm going to speak about Eurociudades, Eurocities. Eurocities are the system to establish a collaboration between twin or border cities. If you see at the map, the most important and most numerous Eurociudades are in the north, in the Galician Portuguese-Galician border. And there are some logos of the that Eurociudades Ibéricas. Now I am going to explain why a Eurocity, ValencaTui. Well, historical reason. The same people, Galaiki, Celtic tribal complex, Galaekia Roman province, Kingdom of the Suevi, Diocese of Tui on both sides of the Minho River until 15th century is enough. Geographical reason, one river, 2 countries, Lower Minho River. Economic reason, half of the transit, the road transit between Spain and Portugal, use the 2 bridges of the ValencaTui over Minho River, about 20,000 people a day, and of course trade, tourism, logistics are a pillar basic of economy of the region. And cultural reason, the same language. Despite some Galician and Portuguese are writing differently, Galician is writing like Spanish, some language are that they are the same language. There are very little different, apart from Spanish official also in the Galician side, the Galician community. Well, how ValencaTui looks like for foreigners? First of all, the region is within the Euro-Siberian region, not the classic cliché of Spain and Portugal, Mediterranean landscape, sun, sea. No, as you can see, it's a very, very Atlantic landscape, typical that you can find, for example, here, no, with some difference. There are, for example, Minho River and mountains, all green, as is typical in all the region. The landscape, the rural landscape, it's like you can see, sparsely, densely populated, but very, very, very sparsely. You can be at a village, walk some meter, and be on the next village. It's typical. And there are some typical rural buildings. For example, here there are the so-called espigueiros, granaries. These granaries, in all northwest Iberian Peninsula, are very typical because of the corn revolution. Corn comes to Europe in 1607 and to Asturias in the north of Spain, and quickly the corn developed all the northwest of Iberian Peninsula. To avoid mouse, these granaries were ideal for peasant. And is this the typical landscape? Food. We have a rich food, not for vegan or vegetarian, of course. Even in the Portuguese side, normally at the restaurant, there is a vegan or vegetarian dish, but is the basic of our gastronomy. For example, on the both sides of the border, octopus. Octopus, for example, the two first pics is octopus a feira style. Feira is a market in Galician and Portuguese. And in Galicia is typical pulpeiras, octopus, in the market cutting the octopus, serving in a pine tree dish, like this. And in Portugal, in the Portuguese side, polvo a lagareiro. It's lagareiro style with potato, garlic, and a lot of olive oil. And for example, but you can see it, but there are an special dish of both sides of the border, lamprey. Lamprey, there are documents of the 19th century that witness existence of commerce of lampreys. Lamprey is a prehistoric fish, fish in the fisheries of the Minho River, and usually is cooked with its own blood. It's lamprey to the borderless Bordeaux style. This is the typical, and of course, conventual sweets. Convents, monasteries are the basic of a rich sweets and pastry of both sides of the border. And culture. As you can see, bagpipes, a Celtic tradition in Galicia and in the Minho River, the Minho region. with a lot of women with all girls to show to people. It's a very, very regional, rich tradition in a country form. Well, and now I want to expose some theories about the ValencaTui Eurocity. The population, as you can see, is more or less the same of the both sides of the border. Median income per capita are a bit higher on the Galician side and lower on the Portuguese side, but lower if we take of reference the median income of Portugal and Spain. A strong way of trade, for example, outlets, petrol tourists, for example, as in Italian in Slovenia, is the same Portuguese in the Galician side. You can see prices of the last week. Supermarkets, and in Valencia, towels, blankets, seats, store. Is very, very typical, and many Galician people, a lot of them, go to Valencia to buy a high quality of Portuguese textile products. And in Valencia, in the Portuguese side, medium-sized supermarket, typical Portuguese, because we have an open timetable, a large, from normally from 9 o'clock to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. or 10, every day, Monday to Sunday, not in the Galician side. And don't forget the Portuguese ways of pilgrimage of the way of Saint James, Camino de Santiago, on the both sides of the border. And I showed you, for example, the both sides of the border, Valencia with the fortress, Tui with the cathedral, and commerce. As you can see, blankets, textile products, Valencia, Tui, the market of Valencia. There are a weekly market and one great monthly market in Valencia, you can see. Funny fact, Pingo 12, Jerónimo Martins. Here in Poland, we have Biedronka, of the same owner. Biedronka. The bag, a Portuguese one, Biedronka one. Portuguese, but tax is paid in the tax haven of the Netherlands. Economy. Well, is and of course typical of what side of the border life in cafes. Coffee for us is very, very important. I talk before, for example, I am able to have 7 coffee a day. But for example, in Portugal, an espresso is only 70 cents. In the Spanish side, €1.20 or 30. And I want to show you some cultural and sporting activities of the Eurocity. A bike, BTT, urban trail, walking, way of Saint James, swimming at the Minho River. For example, ecological buses, run-away of the what municipalities, the same, and music as Numinio, a lot of groups. And I want to show you a video, please, the 10 years of the Euro City. A short video, I promise.
Tu e Valença.
Non se sente.
Vive-se.
The bridge is of 1886, the Eiffel Bridge. Challenge for future. ValencaTui wants to be integrated in a single legal entity. The newspaper, juridically, they want to be only one entity, not two. I don't know how it's possible, but it can be possible joining the two cities. Other problem with the corona, borders closed, statute for cross-border workers, less bureaucracy. 12,000 workers crossing every day the border. Imagine in an area of 100,000 inhabitants. It's a lot of people. And it's now in the next Portuguese-Spanish summit, people is fighting to achieve this statute for the cross-border workers. For example, if you live in Portugal and you work in Spain, there are some limitations. For example, you can want to buy a fridge in Portugal, but you are working in Spain. It's very difficult to have financiation, for example, for this. Because normally banks don't accept money of waste for other countries. It's a sample for this. Other challenge integration of high-speed Atlantic axis. There is a project of high-speed train in Portugal, Lisbon-Porto and Porto-Vigo, and after this joining Vigo-Coruña. This will let Lisbon-Coruña, we are talking about 600 kilometers in less than 3 hours. Problems, Spanish side. Spain don't want. Why? Because Spain want to privilege Madrid-Lisbon. Portugal say no, because they don't want to be a sample province of Madrid, political reasons. But the plan is Horizon 2030. Other challenge, finally, there is the Galicia North Portugal region, the 4 Galician province, and the NUTS-3 Portuguese region of the North region. And the challenge is rethink Transbordering Minho Valley and as a single space. We are talking about the dark blue and the dark green. Why? Because in order to ease pressure of the saturated metropolitan area of Vigo and Viana. For example, a conjunct a hospital for both sides of the border. There are an example in Catalonia between the French Catalonia and Spanish Catalonia. One hospital for both sides of the border. It's an example of rethink transbordering region of Minho. And finally, a bit of fun, a typical Galician Portuguese sense of humor. Chegará ti dalle que ainda imos ter que mandarlle un tractor aos alemáns for the energetic crisis. Husband, will be it enough? Why? Do a bit more. We have yet to send a farm tractor to Germans. It's typical of our humor, typical Galician Portuguese. And obrigado pela sua atenção. Thank you. And I hope you like my presentation.